Genshin loves flourishing its 7 nations through astute cultures, naming conventions, characters, and hints sprinkled throughout the story consistently and plentifully. Prior to the releases, we've had numerous NPCs give details and sneak previews into their respective cultures and backgrounds, as well as read stories about key locations and characters that will be prevalent in stories to come. All except Natlan, which is actually really strange considering the really strong establishment that Natlan started with from a meta perspective. Natlan is actually one of 3 nations that were mentioned in the Genshin Impact webcomic, alongside Mondstadt and Sumeru. The main character is actually a nomad from Natlan, Vennessa, and several points of her travel and the culture of her tribe were mentioned. So why is it that when we get to the game, there is barely any information about Natlan's culture and people? Like, at all. There's no NPCs, vague books, or even descriptions of the place besides the hot springs. Which is a shame because we've had all these crumbs about Sumeru, Fontaine, and even Snezhnaya months before their releases. So today, I want to investigate the fascinating question of what is Natlan, and why don't we know anything about that place? But before we begin, we need to discuss what little background we can form from existing information about the nation of Pyro. This will be a mix of in-game information, plus speculations and theorizing, since the true inspirations, cultures, and even location descriptions of Natlan is unknown to us at the moment. So keep that in mind when we start pooling details alongside confirmed information. So the first question is, what is the nation of Natlan inspired by? The nation of Natlan will be introduced in the Archon Quest Chapter 5, Incandescent Ode of Resurrection, and worships the Lady of War known as Murata. The people of Natlan are known for their prevalence in the art of war, and a certain group known as the Children of Murata. The Children of Murata were characterized by having red hair and actually one of many tribes in Natlan. Venti states that back in those days, warriors from every tribe would perform rites of combat and celebrate victories in her name. This sets as a precedent for the base ideologies that Natlan has when it comes to the art of war and the honor of combat. But when thinking of the cultures that they could be inspired from, I can think of several. I'm actually taking a lot of information from my older videos since Natlan is one of the nations that hardly has any real developments. First is that because it's a nation ruled by hot springs created by volcanic activity, it makes me wonder if the nation itself takes geological inspiration from the concept of the Pacific Ring of Fire or the Circum-Pacific Belt. Firstly, because it sounds so cool for the nation of Pyro to take inspiration from a literal region known as the Ring of Fire. And also because the Pacific Ring of Fire is a path alongside the Pacific Ocean characterized by active volcanoes and frequent earthquakes. A really nice starting draft for a nation of fire. And taking from the list of nations within the Pacific Ring of Fire, I'm thinking that Natlan is inspired by Mesoamerican and West African cultures. I believe that Natlan's main cultural reference is derived from the Aztecs, a civilization that flourished in Mexico and generally spoke the language known as Nahuatl. The people of Aztec were known as migrators from a homeland called Aztlan. The Aztecs were known as a nomadic culture before settling and creating the town of Tenochtitlan, which would actually be modern-day Mexico. Historical pieces suggested that they were a tribe of hunter-gatherers that migrated southward who eventually developed as a civilization after settling down. The depiction of the elder in Vennessa's flashback from the manga remind me of the feathered headdresses worn by the leaders during the Aztec civilization. Aztecs held feathers as a very sacred gift because it's one of nature's most precious resources, considering the Aztecs have Quetzalcoatl, who is a symbol of death and resurrection. Going back to the supposed title of the Archon Quest, Aztecs also believe in resurrection, or more specifically, ascension. According to Wikipedia, after death, the soul of the Aztec went to one of 3 places: the sun, Nixtlan, or Tlalocan. Souls of fallen warriors and women that died in childbirth would transform into hummingbirds that followed the sun on its journey through the sky. To the Aztecs, death was instrumental in the perpetuation of creation, and gods and humans alike had the responsibility of sacrificing themselves in order to allow life to continue. Which really brings to light 2 scenes from the webcomic. One was the elder talking about Celestia and how if a person dies and gets chosen by the gods, they will become immortal and protect the world alongside them. The second is when Vennessa sends to Celestia, she assumes the form of a falcon. Pretty neat. Maybe accidental, but pretty neat. But besides the Aztec culture, There is another reference culture related to Natlan, and that is the Yoruba religion. The Yoruba religion is connected to the Natlan TV trailer character Iyansin, whose name is derived from the Oya. Iyansa was her name in Latin America derivatives of the Yoruba religion, and she is known as an Orisha of winds, lightning and violent storms, rebirth, and death. Orisha are essentially the spirits in the Yoruba religion, and their job is to teach humanity to become successful on Earth. A really nice inspiration for the character that's supposed to be pretty influential to the traveler once we get to this part of the story. And if we're looking at environments, look no further than the potential flattened top pyramids of the Aztec civilization, or numerous stone ruins, and massive large volcanoes and hot springs. I'm not too keen on a heat mechanic that requires cryo or hydro though, but it is what it is, you know? The next one is, who is the Archon? The Pyro Archon's demon name is currently unknown in-game, but my theory is that it's either Furcas or Aim, or Haburim. Furcas is a knight and is depicted wearing a horse while holding a sharp weapon. He teaches philosophy, astronomy, rhetoric, logic, chiromancy, and pyromancy, which would honestly be such a shame if the Pyro Archon isn't depicted as someone that's on a horse. But if we're going by the more warish version of her character, Aim is a really good demon to consider. Aim is a great Duke of Hell and sets many castles and great places on fire, makes men witty in all ways, and carries a lit firebrand. So we have two demon names who have a very strong affinity to fire. Pretty nice. But regardless of our Goetia name, we know that her colloquial name is Murata, and Venti describes her as a warmongering wretch. And pretty obnoxious at times, actually. I also think that she has inspirations from the tribal god of the Aztecs, Huitzilopochtli, the deity of war, sun, human sacrifice, and the patron of the city of Tenochtitlan. Besides the human sacrifices thing, which might not even be that far-fetched at this point, considering the story and that she's the aspect of war, I believe that Murata embodies all sides of war. If I were to compare her to something, it would be like the mix of Ares and Athena, two deities from the Greek pantheon that represents two sides of war. Ares represented the harsher and brashier brutality of war, the inevitable bloodshed, consequences, and grit that comes from conquest. Raw strength, manpower, and constitution were the embodiments of a soldier, and the honor of a warrior is on the line when it comes to battle. Athena, on the other hand, embodies the tactics of war, strategy, secrets, traditions. She respects military prowess and personifies glory, victory, and martial ideals. The Agnetis Agate gemstone actually shows us a bit of Murata's personality. While the name is impossible to decipher with any current piece of lore we have, if I were to theorize about Murata's personality, it would be just like how Venti says that she's loud and boisterous on the surface, but holds a deeper respect for the intricacies of war. And the last question is, why don't we know anything about Natlan? Natlan consists of nomadic tribes that scour the world instead of settling in a particular place, which actually makes it all the more fascinating that we haven't seen a single NPC from there. But it could also be because of internal affairs. The last time we saw Natlan was in the webcomic, but thousands of years have passed since then. There's no telling what kind of civilization Natlan even has right now. But I think that Natlan, if we're going by the Aztec route, has gone from a nomadic culture to the Aztec-inspired civilization we know today. But it could also have something to do with conquest. After settling, the Aztecs focus on conquering within the area of their homeland. And for a nation that focuses on war, I feel like we'll have to eventually encounter internal warring states and tribes in the area. This reminds me a lot of Inazuma before it came out. We actually knew almost nothing about that nation either, because of internal political seclusions that locked the nation off. A part of me thinks that this could also be the case with Natlan, but instead of the god locking them up, it's a constant state of conquest that's keeping them preoccupied. Another good one is that maybe Natlan, in some way, changed throughout the years. While geologically it's theorized that Natlan is connected to the north of Mondstadt, the location being known as a fire zone and almost a natural hazard could be keeping the people in and preventing long-distance travel. However, we know that there's actually nothing bad happening in Natlan in recent times because several NPCs have entered and left Natlan in one piece. The Inazuman NPC Ting Ting states that her trip to Natlan was pretty smooth, while Aikawa Susumu has been there before and just comments about the scorching temperatures. But my favorite theory is that it has something to do with the secret that the god of war has for us. As a god of war, she would be the most privy to the ideologies of Celestia when it comes to retribution and conquest. Consider this. Celestia has been known to take very, very drastic measures in silencing those that they deem a threat to their peace. The event that also established Tevat's hierarchy is known as a war amongst the demon gods, a race that was allegedly at peace with each other before the whole war for territory. If I were to guess, Natlan being a closed-off nation isn't just because it's warring with itself, but also because their god has yet to make her next move despite everything. This could either be by keeping the inner workings of her nation a secret, or by preoccupying her nation with an internal conflict. The Ensleeved's dialogue about the Archon quest is as follows and might give us a little bit more insight into this. The rules of war are woven in the womb. The victors shall burn bright, while the losers must turn to ash. When the god of war shares the secret with the traveler, it is because she has her reasons. This reminds me a lot about the duel in Tenshokaku. We also know that Capitano was a harbinger sent to Natlan, which actually pairs super well with the themes of conquest and warriorhood. Capitano is known as a very respected captain in the Fatui and has great personal strength, but he is also honorable, or at least that's what it seems on the surface. Scaramouche kind of holds Capitano in contempt because the Fatui constantly praise his strength and righteousness, exemplified by Child's grand reverence for him and Varka's respect for the harbinger, which honestly would be a pretty great personification for the ideals Natlan holds. Each of the harbingers introduced in their respective nations has had a fair share of history, except maybe Tartaglia. But Capitano's seemingly honorable and combative nature would make him the great personification of a perfect warrior, which could make his interaction with the Archon all the more fascinating and probably much more cordial than the other instances. Well, better than a kick, the bar is not that high. I can definitely see Capitano taking the Gnosis fair and square from the god of war by either beating her in combat or proving himself worthy of the Gnosis. Regardless, the god of war would also have theoretically the best insight on the Tsaritsa's prerogative to declare war against the entirety of Tevat, which would make sense why she's enlightening the traveler on the secrets of victors burning bright. All things considered, I can see the god of war being an impartial being that understands both sides of the conflict about Celestia and humans, rather than the other Archons who didn't really give their own insights into the Tsaritsa's plan. Now for my final thoughts. It's obvious that the reason why Natlan hasn't been mentioned yet is because Hoyo's not yet done, which is honestly a really big shame. I think Fontaine was loved by everyone because of the aesthetic, but I think Natlan would be a very close second if we incorporate principles. Well, if they get developed enough. Please no Inazuma Archon Quest incident. But that's it for me. A shorter video, all things considered, and actually a revamp of an older video from 2021. Oh my god. Anyway, my name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me. Where is Natlan, Hoyo? Literally just one line of lore about that place and I'll be happy.